If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum leadership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. I love Anchor because it's really easy to use, very accessible to record your podcast, and has excellent sound quality. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hello, I am Jennifer Lynn Purcell, aka Ever-Tuning Butterfly, bringing to you a living with an invisible learning challenge where we will discuss the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD. I don't know if you're a new listener or not, but I would like to share with you where I get most of my articles for this podcast. I've recently learned about a nonprofit that I would really like to help. It's the NLD Project. In addition to doing research on NLD and working to get it back on the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, that is the DSM, they provide support groups for those with NLD. You can find the NLD Project at www.nvld.org. All proceeds from this podcast and the ads will go towards the NLD Project. I will include the link for this in the description of the podcast. Please go to livingwithnld.com to learn more about my podcast. Also, I would like to announce that I now have created a YouTube channel for this podcast. I will post the link for this in the description for you. This episode won't be easy for me to record because I'm talking about a previous relationship I had. Also, if you have been through breakups or anything that or any relationship that you learned more about it when you got out of it, then or been addicted to something you shouldn't have while you were in that relationship, like sex, then this episode could be triggering for you. So let's go down the rabbit hole to a time when I messed up big. And when I say big time, I mean probably in every possible way you could imagine, and with my family and friends, and with one of my friendships. And we're going back to March of 2019 when I started to date someone that I liked quite a bit, but my family was concerned about some things about him because of how the relationship got off to a rocky start. You won't recognize this Jennifer because she's like night and day to who I am now. I don't even recognize her looking back. Whew, okay, this is tricky and hard because I have a migraine right now, so bear with me. It got off to a rocky start because I didn't tell my parents that I was going to have what we will call him Sam over to the house while they were out of town. He thought it was allowed. I knew it wasn't, but I did it anyway because I wanted to meet him. And just so you guys know, I met Sam through an online dating app called Coffee Meets Bagel. Wanted to give you that as a background as well. So I kept the meetup at the house for about 5 days, and my parents found out because of us having a Ring doorbell, which will show you who comes to our front door and certain areas close to the door. I thought if he entered through the backyard that they wouldn't know about it, but I didn't know about the doorbell piece until my brother came to visit a couple of weeks later to try to help the situation between my parents and me get better. The situation had only gotten rocky because I had invited Sam over without their permission when they were out of town. If I hadn't done that and waited until they were back to meet him, then things would have been very, very, and extremely different. My parents were willing to have him over for dinner because they wanted to get to know him, and I was surprised that they were willing to do this even though I had broken their rules and about having someone over to the house while they were out of town and without their permission. So let's fast forward a month after I've been dating Sam and decided to move in with him and his family, which consists of a younger brother and his dad. And also, two of his cousins and one of his cousins' girlfriends lived in the same house as his dad and his brother. I learned that Sam had told his family about me having NLD and being sexually abused. I didn't know how much detailed he went into these topics because I didn't ask. After all, I didn't feel comfortable asking because I wasn't sure who he was going to share it with after asking him about it, or what other information he would share without my permission or consent. This was big for me because not everyone in my extended family believed me and may not still believe my side of the story. And I have told about the sexual abuse. I'm still trying to wrap my head around this, even though I have known this for about 13 years now. Yeah, I know. Crap. Sam also has a mental disorder, quote, schizophrenia, a long-term mental disorder of a type of involving a breakdown in the relationship between thought, emotion, and behavior, leading to faulty perception, inappropriate actions and feelings, withdrawal from reality and personal relationships into fantasy and illusion, and a sense of mental fragmentation. In general, use and mentality or approach characterized by inconsistent or contradictory elements. And that is a definition from the dictionary. This made things worse because Sam didn't take his schizophrenia seriously like he should have, which affected how seriously he took my learning challenge. I know that schizophrenia and NLD are different, but because Sam didn't take what he had seriously by not taking his prescriptions to help him, and he didn't let therapy help him either, he didn't think my NLD was a big thing. This was extremely false. As many of you know, if you have NLD or know someone who does and have been listening to the podcast for a while. Also, he didn't like his construction job of fixing and repairing drills because he wanted to be a nurse, but couldn't because he hadn't attended college. He didn't like talking about his job, which affected me because I was working in a job that I liked and wanted to talk about. That job at the time was working with children who have autism and young adults who have autism as well. I was working as a behavioral technician with them and using ABA therapy. I could only talk about my job to his dad because he found it interesting, but I usually did this only for a short while because if Sam was present, I knew he would lose interest. I did make many mistakes in this relationship. One of the ones I made that had to do with my friend Jeff. I was wanting to have lunch with Jeff, but Sam didn't believe me when I told him that Jeff and I were just friends and that there was nothing romantic between us. Consequently, I lost Jeff as a friend. But recently, last year, I was able to get Jeff back as a friend because I reached out to him over Facebook. I did this by unblocking him around 3 a.m. when I had woken up and was thinking about him and couldn't go back to sleep. I sent him a long message that I would like to read to you. Yes, I do have permission from Jeff to share what we talked about that day. So, quote, "Hey, long no chat. One of the several mistakes I made in my first relationship was losing you as a friend. I thought of that last night, like I have many times, and wondered if you would forgive me for what I had did, and texted you on that day that we were supposed to have lunch last year. I'm not sure if you will forgive me, but I wanted to try to let you know that I'm sorry about what I did. I miss having you as a friend and would love to have you back if I can, but I also understand if I can't. There are many things we'll need to catch up on, but that's for you to decide. Anyway, I'm going back to sleep that got now that I got that all off my mind, heart, and chest and spirit. I know I'm asking for a big thing, but I do remember what you said to me about forgiveness, that it's for the forgiver, not the other person. I'm probably not remembering it, that quote exactly." His response was, "I've imagined from time to time what I'd do or say if you ever tried to get back into contact with me. It wasn't kind. Those reactions were born of spite, but that's not who I am. I'm not one to meet a genuine apology with a sneer. I've given second chances to people who've done worse than you." My response: "Sorry it took me a while to respond. I'm at work. I guess this means that you're accepting my apology." His response: "It does." My response: "Thank you for making me feel better by saying that you have given second chances to people who did worse than me. Thank you so much for accepting it. You don't know how much that means to me." His response: "There was once a girl named Emily who bullied me throughout elementary school and middle school. When she messaged me about a year after high school to say that she regretted her actions, I forgave her. She put me through years of aggravation. Um, you fucked up once. Big fuck up, to be sure. It hurt that you didn't trust me to be looking out for you, but it was one time." My response: "Yes, I know it was once, and I know that I hurt you, and I'm sorry I did that. I should have trusted you more than my ex because I knew you longer than I did him. Sorry about what happened with Emily and what she did to you." His response: "Well, now you know, hormones make fools of us all." My response: "If you want to chat about what we have surpassed, what has surpassed since last year and now, let me know, please. Yes, that's very true, and so does romantic love." As I went on to fill Jeff in on what had surpassed in the last year, I found out that even though we hadn't talked for a while, it didn't feel like that because he made me feel so comfortable by letting me talk to him about anything I wanted to, just like we used to do. I had missed talking to him and with him because he's like a second brother to me. That's how close we are to each other. I feel blessed to have Jeff back. I also feel blessed that when I was with my friends Natalie and Janine, that they weren't affected by the relationship because I handled those relationships differently. I didn't spend any time with Natalie when I was with Sam, so I thought she would have been affected the same way as Jeff, but she said that she was happy for me while I was with him and was sad when it ended. And yes, I do have permission from Natalie to share what I just shared. And I also have permission from Janine to share what she shared with me. Janine wasn't affected by it because we hung out every Sunday at church, and I would have been at Sam's house the day before. I am truly blessed to have these 3 close friends that are like siblings to me. I can't begin to thank them enough for supporting me with NVLD and the sexual abuse all of these years. They have been my friends. I hope that they feel supported whenever I try to support them when they're going through something difficult for them to go through personally. Another mistake I made was lying to Sam about being a good sorry. Another mistake I made was lying to Sam about having a good amount of credit card debt while I was in a relationship with him. My parents and brother knew about it, but he didn't. I eventually told him, but that wasn't until we had already broke up, which happened in early August of 2019. I also lied to Sam about other things that I thought was okay to lie about, but he didn't, and I think that was due to his schizophrenia. The first lie I told Sam was about my parents knowing his address. I thought that was okay because I wanted them to know just in case I needed them to ever come and pick me up. They never came to his house, his dad's house anyways, because I never asked them to. But I felt better them knowing the address just in case. I learned about this lie the day before I went on my first surf lesson with my brother Jonathan. Sam was hurt by my lie because he thought he could trust me with private information. He gave me an ultimatum that day that if I stopped lying, he wouldn't break up with me. Basically, if I told him about all the lies, meaning the debt, that he wouldn't break up with me. I thought about telling him about the credit card debt, but I wasn't sure how he would take it and if he would understand it because of not being independent himself. The next day, I had a surf lesson with my brother. We talked about the conversation with Sam. This wasn't an easy conversation because I didn't like what I had done. It was easier because my brother and I were closer than Sam and I were, so I knew I could trust my brother. The next day, when I was at work, I got vertigo, which was probably caused by having a really bad migraine, being lightheaded, and having gotten a lot of water in my ears the previous day from surfing. I vomited for an hour and a half that day. That was a terrible day. My brother had to rush me to the ER, and I threw up on the way there. My parents came, even though I didn't think they would because of my relationship with them not being good, and them having dinner with some friends. I forgot to remember that they still loved me like hell, even though I was treating them extremely badly. Gotta love your parents, right? I had my blood drawn and took a urine test. I still was dizzy while this was all happening. Felt really weird to get your blood drawn when that was happening. So they gave me a pill to stop the nausea, which worked. It felt weird to get the blood drawn because I couldn't see anything that was going on. I could only feel it since the world and the room were still spinning around me. And I'm sharing this story because when I got back to my parents' house and Sam met me there to drive me home, he was very nice to me despite what had happened 2 days ago. He was concerned about me because he knew about my chronic migraines. but he had never known that they could affect me like they just had. He was used to me sleeping for hours to cope with them, but not vomiting at all. When we got back to his place, I took a shower and laid down and slept because that's all I wanted to do after going through what I had just experienced. I had already eaten dinner at my parents' house while waiting for Sam to pick me up. Next day, Sam made a special dinner for his younger brother to thank him for driving him to his parents' house the previous day. Sam and I had some things in common. We both like to cook, hike, fish, and the outdoors. But he didn't like to listen to country music, which I did. Consequently, I would listen to it whenever he wasn't in the bedroom or when I was driving to work. This bothered me because my brother doesn't like country music, but he will let me play a couple of songs when he is in the same room as I am in. And so I want to share with you something from the NBLD project. So I want to share something with you from the NBLD project. It's an article by Amanda, who is, quote, a project social ambassador, and she has learned about NLD because she had learned about it when she was a teenager. She is under the impression that she is meant to have a life harder than the average teen, but that it will get easier. And that was 10 years ago. She still has NVLD, but now she is now she has a bachelor's degree in depression. She says that she doesn't understand the impact that the combination has on her and hopes that she can explore this together with her posts. So the article is titled NVLD and Breakups by Amanda. She says quote, I screwed up this year. I was going through some personal issues relating to my mental health and needed to go to a special program to help me sort out those issues. We had been getting closer and were even talking about getting back together. I told him we would wait until I got out of my program to revisit the topic. And when we did, we were on different wavelengths. He wanted a family, and I told him that I didn't think it would be a good for my health if I procreated. I told him that I had just gotten out of an intense therapy program, and the postpartum stuff scares me. He has no idea it's really because I'm afraid my NBLD would make the wife and mother thing harder. Over time, he just wanted to help and make sure that I was okay before we did anything further. Unfortunately, I mistook his friendship as a sign that he was ready to get back together. When he started pulling away, I would do anything in my book that I could to keep any sort of line or communication open, even though I kept telling him that I can't be just friends with him. It would be too painful. I would message him or text every day and talk about my day, even if he didn't ask about his day. Send him memes, gifts, anything to start a conversation. And if I saw him read it and didn't respond, I just keep going on with a one-sided conversation, hoping to spark a sort of interest. Geez, reading it and writing does sound of kind of crazy fangirl stalker. End quote. I can relate to Amanda because after Sam and I broke up, we began a friends with benefits relationship, which was my choice, but I regret it because it made it harder for me to let go of him. We did this for 5 months. I thought we were going to get back together, but we didn't because he found another girl. He found her while he was attending college. I was happy he was pursuing his dream, like what I had done. It was easier because so I was happy he was pursuing his dream, but I was sad because I was losing someone that I had considered to be a close friend. Another mistake I made was being too focused on my relationship with Sam, that I had tunnel vision for basically 10 months, 5 months while we were together and 5 months while we were friends with benefits. This was a mistake because I didn't see what went so wrong with my parents' and brother's relationship. Another mistake I had made was not describing my relationship with my parents accurately to Sam when we were together. I made him think that we had a terrible relationship, that they yelled at me, and that we fought a lot, and that they didn't let me do anything that a young adult wanted to do. When in reality, they didn't yell at me, but were firm with me when they got frustrated or annoyed with me because I was being difficult. Or when I would break an agreement and would want to be rebellious. Sam made me be rebellious after all. I wanted to get a taste of being able to do whatever I wanted to do because I felt like I couldn't do that even when I was in college. Because when I was in college, I was a nerdy, dorky student because I wanted to do well in my classes, especially when I found out I had NLD. My parents gave me anything I wanted while I was with Sam, probably because they didn't want to fight with me anymore about it and wanted me to be happy ultimately. I thought I was happy many times when I was with Sam because he did make me happy, safe, protected, and loved. But that only lasted for about a month or two. I did feel it at other times when my lies didn't cloud his emotions, but that didn't last long. I couldn't change this until he ended the Friends for Benefits in early January of 2020. And after I started therapy after the con artist experience. I started therapy right on my birthday in early April. This is when I was able to start to get my parents and brother back by earning their trust and doing the hard, difficult work in therapy. I learned that I don't want to. I learned that I learned what I do and don't want in the future. I don't want to date someone in the future that doesn't have a strong handle on their sexual abuse or private challenges like a mental disorder or learning challenges. This is true because I know that what it's like to do the work to heal from sexual abuse and to tackle challenges that are related to NLD. And I also learned that I was addicted to the physical and hormonal aspects of sex. So which happened when, so that's why I did the Friends with Benefits, which I shouldn't have done, which would have made it easier for me to let go of him this past year if I hadn't. I still think about him because I haven't found anyone to fill the spot because of COVID, wanting to protect myself and my family from being infected, especially since young people can be asymptomatic. The only time I contacted Sam was at the beginning of COVID quarantine because I was concerned about how his family was doing. I learned that they were doing fine. I haven't contacted him since, even though I still think of him, and I deleted his contact information a while ago to get rid of the temptation. I do admit that wasn't easy to do. I even recently got rid of a necklace and some gifts we gave each other because when I would see them in my room, they would remind me of painful memories. I also learned that I need to be able to have someone that I can trust with anything I tell them, with I tell him. After all, I couldn't have deep conversations with Sam as he wanted because I wasn't sure what information he would share without my permission to his family or friends. Following are songs that make me think of Sam: For Good from Wicked and The Rose by Keala Settle, Rules by Dylan Scott, What I Like About You by Jonas Blue and Theresa Rex, Miss Me More by Kelsea Ballerina, Hard to Love by Lee Brice, Grace Wins by Matthew West, and Caught in the Storm by Smashcast. There's probably more, but that's just a few. All the personal work I've been doing recently has paid off because during Thanksgiving of last year, my family said that they were so happy and grateful for getting me back. It made me cry. After all, I knew how badly I had treated them during their relationship because I wanted to get, uh, because I knew how badly I treated them during the relationship because I could tell that I wasn't close to my mom or my parents whenever I would see their faces on Sunday mornings. But now I can happily say that my relationship is closer than ever and that I have my parents and brother back. I have to thank myself for doing the hard work and them for doing the hard work also. I did, and for me to doing the hard work to create this podcast because I have been extremely vulnerable with you all. And you have been in return, and I have to thank you in return for being a wonderful audience to me. I have learned a lot about myself and individuals with NLD by doing this. I continue to learn more about NLD by doing this podcast too. I want to thank my family and friends for supporting me through the through the thin and very thick mud. Because if I didn't have the support system that I have, I don't know where I would be today. My support has made me victorious, as Lena Halden sings in that song. Whew. It would have been much harder for me to accomplish all the goals that I have without them. So thank you to infinity and beyond. I can also say that I know it wasn't meant to be with Sam because I believe that things happen for a reason and that Spirit knew that I needed to have a better relationship with my family. Also, there are some tips that Amanda gave in her article that I would like to share with you. Quote, here are some tips to get through a breakup. Make it be a no contact breakup, even when they say, I want to stay friends. I don't want to be dead to you. It's everyone's best interest to have space to process everything. Don't use food to cope. That's a good one. If you forget to eat when you're stressed, try to set timers throughout the day to eat a little. Something on the contrary, if you use food to cope, try to do a healthy activity to prevent yourself from eating everything on site just because you are sad and stressed. Seriously, don't reach out to them. It's will only be more painful and harder to rip the Band-Aid off in the end, especially if they were your biggest emotional support. Reach out to friends and family for support. If you see mental health counselors, increase your appointments for a while, end quote. I and others who have NLD have a harder time in romantic relationships than neurotypicals do because of the many things that I talked about in this episode. I'm not saying that neurotypicals don't have a hard time. I'm just saying that people with NVLD have a harder time, because whether it's because you have a hard time reading social cues describing what NLD is, or knowing when to tell your significant other about it. I and others who are trying to date or want to and have NLD still have these issues today, along with countless others. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I will talk to you next Friday. Bye. I want to thank my parents and my brother for supporting me when I was with Sam, because they did support me even though I broke all the rules and agreements and made them cry, and it made it difficult for them to love me. They also made it easy for me to come home after I broke up with him, or after we broke up. And I can remember many times when we would talk and about the rules and agreements and try to figure out how to make things work out, and all of us would be crying because it was difficult, and would be yelling at each other because we were frustrated and mad with each other. And they stood with me through the difficult 5 months when I was with Sam and 5 months when I was seeing him with benefits. And they were, this is hard for me to record, but they were willing for me to do this even though I was lying to them and going behind their backs when they didn't know about the friends with benefits. In the beginning was Sam. I lied about that in the beginning, but eventually told them that I was doing that, and they let me continue to do that with Sam. And I do need to thank them too, because they have always been there for me, and they've always had my back, and they've always supported me through anything that I've needed support with, and they've always been there when I've needed help with anything, and I really appreciate that. And I really also appreciate that they made it easier for me to come back home, because I don't know what I would have done if they didn't let me come back home after I broke up with Sam. I don't know where I would have gone. So I really do appreciate the support that I have from my parents and from my brother. And I'm also really happy that I was able to make the relationship with them better when I got back home after the relationship ended. So I just wanted to record that tonight and say that I appreciate their support. Thank you. As I wrap up, there are some things I would like to share with you. I do have a website for this podcast. It is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page for this podcast. It is called Living with NLD. I will include the links for those in the description. In conclusion, I would like to hear from my audience. If you know individuals with NLD that I could interview for this podcast, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com. What are you interested in learning about NLD? I know I'm not an expert, but I do know I have the living experience of having it. I would like you to practice journaling about your gifts and differences. Also see if there is a way that you can make that difference become easier for you to do than it originally was. Thank you for listening today, and please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. Thank you. Bye.